thousands of people have mysteriously vanished in America's wilderness. Join us as we dive into the deep end of the unexplainable and try to piece together what happened. You are listening to Locations Unknown.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Locations Unknown. I'm your co-host, Joe Erato, and with me, as always, is a guy who would never deny health insurance claims, Mike Van de Bogert.
Oh, thank you, Joe, and thank you once again to all of our amazing listeners for tuning in. Just a couple of announcements before we get going here. First, some new Patreon shout-outs, so thank you to Rosalind Koss, Nicole Venoni, and Kat Waller. Thank you for supporting the show.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for being the first supporters to join the show in 2025. Big deal, kind of. Not really, but we thank you nonetheless. If you want to call the show and leave a spicy voicemail, you can call 208-391-6913. Joe and I are probably going to do a Patreon or members-only episode after this, going through a lot of our new voicemails, so you're missing out if you're not a member. We also have some other great shows in the Unknown Media Group network now that you should go check out. So Peanut Butter and Mountains podcast, Off the Trails, The Weirdos We Know, and recently Who Runs This Park. So make sure to head on over to their channels and check them out. We'll have links in the description of this episode. If you want to support the show, you can always join Patreon, YouTube memberships, premium subscriptions at Apple. What am I missing?
YouTube
members.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm sure one of them.
Yeah, and you know what? If money's tight and you can't support the show monetarily, you can always just go and subscribe and leave a like or a rating. Those help the show too with the bots and everything that will help our show get to the top of the charts. So
yeah, and tell everyone you know.
Everyone you know until they tell you to unfriend them and go away. So, outside of that, Joe, any updates on your end?
No, sir. All right, everybody, let's gear up and get out to explore Locations Unknown. May 23rd. 1950, a skilled mountaineer was with a group of people skiing near Ape Canyon in Washington's Gifford, Pinchot National Forest. In the morning, he split from his party to capture photography of them from a daring vantage point. This would be the last anyone has ever seen of him again. Was it a tragic accident, or is there a hidden truth lurking in these ancient woodlands? Join us this week as we investigate the mysterious disappearance of Jim Carter. So we are going to the Ape Canyon area of the Gifford Pinchot National Forest. It is a narrow gorge in the southeast flank of Mount St. Helens in Washington state. It hugs the edge of the plains of Abraham and otherworldly pumice plain created by the volcanic activity that occurred there. The upper portions of Ape Canyon is around 4,800 feet. It is in Washington state, as we said. It was established in 1908 and sees 1.5 to 2 million visitors per year.
And we're going to reference the National Forest from here on out just because the canyon is like the sublocation where this happened.
Yeah, we'll just always say National Forest, but
yeah,
if you paid attention already,
yes,
you know where it is. So some of the habitation history of the area, archaeological evidence suggests that humans arrived in the Pacific Northwest shortly after the last ice age. potentially as early as 12,000 to 14,000 years ago. While specific dates vary by site, finds in and around the southern Washington Cascades place human habitation in the region by at least 9,000 to 10,000 years ago. Multiple tribal groups historically used and continue to use the resources within what is now the National Forest. They did not necessarily live in one spot year-round, but moved seasonally to hunt, fish, and gather edible plants, including huckleberries, depending on the elevation and resource availability. European and American settlers and explorers reached the southwestern Washington area in the early to mid-19th century, which led to significant changes in indigenous lifeways through disease, displacement, and the formation of reservations and treaties. So some interesting facts about the Mount St. Helens eruption on May 18th, 1980. It was the largest landslide recorded in history. The collapse of Mount St. Helens' north flank released about 2.8 cubic kilometers of debris, which is the biggest landslide ever documented. It had a massive lateral blast, so it didn't blow out the top, it kind of blew out the side, it's called a typical vertical eruption. The initial blast shot horizontally, devastating an area over 230 square miles. So, shockwave speeds, the lateral blast traveled over 300 miles per hour, leveling force up to 17 miles away within minutes.
When I hear about Mount St. Helens, I always remember that movie Dante's Peak with Pierce Brosnan.
I love that movie.
Yeah, I do too. It's awful.
I mean, you know what? I don't even think it's awful.
I mean,
and it's funny because I didn't know we were doing this one.
Yeah.
In the last 3 weeks, I thought about watching Dante's Peak at least 2 times. For no, you know what it was? I won't say for no particular reason. They had that volcanic eruption recently that just like they had all the shots of like the clouds.
Yeah.
And I think when I saw that, I was like, Dante's Peak. I should watch that movie again.
I'm gonna look up while you're talking the Rotten Tomatoes score to see if you can guess.
Okay. Yes. Don't tell me what it is. Let me guess. The ash column soared more than 15 miles into the air, reaching the stratosphere and spreading across multiple states. Fine volcanic ash circled the globe in about 2 weeks, impacting flight routes and weather patterns. Scientists estimate the force of the eruption was equivalent to 1,600 times the size of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The mountain's peak dropped from 9,677 feet to 8,365 feet, creating a 1 mile wide horseshoe-shaped crater. Superheated gas and volcanic matter poured down on the slopes at speeds of up to 450 miles per hour, incinerating everything in their path.
That would be terrifying to...
Well, was there 3 campers that died and a photographer, or there was a... I could get I'm going off memory, so this could be wrong, but I feel like there was either a park ranger that was on the either on the radio or doing recordings. No, it was a volcanologist that was doing tape recordings and actually recorded up to the moment where he perished in the volcanic cloud. And there were 3 hikers that died, I think 2 that were hiking in the blast zone.
57 people were killed in the eruption.
57?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Most deaths were caused by basically no air.
Okay,
or
so like asphyxiation?
From inhaling hot ash or trauma from the pyroclastic flows, which you just talked about, that came down the mountain at 450 miles an hour. There were also indirect causes such as road accidents and heart attacks.
Okay, so that's in that number?
I believe so.
Okay, I thought it was a smaller number that was actually like on the side of the mountain at the time.
So just some quick stats. It damaged 200 homes, 47 bridges, 15 miles of railway, and 185 miles of highway. It killed approximately 7,000 big game animals and 12 million fingerling hatcheries. And like Joe said, it reduced the elevation and created a mile-wide horseshoe crater. But yeah, 57 people were directly or indirectly killed by the blast.
That's why I thought it was a much smaller number.
So did
tragic.
Quickly, Rotten Tomatoes. What do you think
Dante's Peak?
What do you think the critic score was?
Critic scores are always wrong.
Yeah.
But I do feel like in this case, they're probably wrong downwards. I'm going to say they gave it like a 40. What's the score out of?
It's like
out of 100?
0 to 100%.
45 to 55%.
Okay. And then what do you think? So the
critic, that's the critic score.
That's the audience score. Audience score, and they has over 100,000 ratings.
75.
Critics score 30%. Audience score 38%.
Oh no!
And usually, like the audience score, like if it's like 100 reviews, like that could be wrong. But I feel like over 100,000 people reviewed it.
People did not like that movie.
They did not like that movie.
I really liked that
Came out in
movie.
1997. I mean, I was still a kid. I remember watching it, thinking it was super cool.
I did too. I really enjoyed that movie.
I watched it a few years ago as an adult, and I'm like, wow, this is awful.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay, I haven't seen it in probably 15 years.
Okay, yeah. Watch it again, you'll be like, ooh.
But I also like bad movies.
I do too.
Like,
I like the 90s had a string of like, remember like Deep Impact?
For people who are listening, since a lot of people listen to the show, I guess I should put an asterisk with my rating. I'm rating this at a high rating in a completely separate category than good movies.
Yeah.
So like Dune 2 to me was like a 95% because it was just a masterpiece.
Or like Goodfellas.
Yeah, like Dante's Peak isn't even in this subsection of rating. It's in a separate area of movie rating. And like the only one lower than that is like the Sharknado movies.
Yeah.
Or the movie The Pest with John Leguizamo, which I would rate very high, but nowhere in the same category as like a good movie.
Yeah.
It's a high rating to me because it's a completely obnoxious comedy that is so dumb that it entertains me.
Well, it's those another series of movies that are just so bad, but I watch them because they're entertaining. Is the Gerard Butler Olympus Has Fallen movies?
I love that movie
like
too.
3 or 4
but
of
it's
them.
not a good movie.
No, they're terrible.
But I would watch
They're
it.
awful.
Yes,
but for some reason, it's like a car accident. Like when you're driving by, you just look.
Here's the deal. It entertains me, and that's the point of it. The point of a movie is to entertain me.
Gerard Butler, he is just cashing checks because his movies are usually awful.
And this is why I also love Nick Cage.
He hasn't had a good movie probably since 300.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, because you'd start watching Gerard Butler movies and like, oh, 300 was amazing.
Yeah.
This is going to be good. And you're like, oh, another miss.
But hey, you know what? Good for him for...
Yeah, he's in more movies than I am.
He's cashing those checks.
Yeah, his IMDb page is better than mine.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into the climate. So the Gifford Pinchot National Forest is situated between the Cascades crest to the east and the Pacific coast to the west. Moisture-laden air from the ocean travels inland, meeting the mountainous terrain and releasing precipitation, especially in fall, winter, and spring. The forest experiences relatively moderate temperatures compared to inland areas at similar latitudes. Cold snaps are less severe at lower elevations because of the maritime airflow. The west-facing slopes, or the windward side of the Cascades, receive heavy precipitation. Some areas can exceed 80 to 100 inches of total precipitation annually. So the wet season is late fall through early spring. That's roughly November to May. It's characterized by frequent rain in lower elevations and snow at mid to high elevations. The dry season is June to September, and summer are typically drier and mild, though thunderstorms can occur in mountainous zones. So higher elevations in the forest, these are the areas around Mount Adams and Mount St. Helens and the Goat Rocks Wilderness, accumulate significant snowfall in the winter with snowpack persisting into late spring and early summer. So the terrain is deeply carved ridges and, as you say that, Kirks?
I think so, yeah.
Bowl-shaped valleys. They reflect both volcanic origins and thousands of years of glaciation. These features dominate the higher elevations, creating dramatic backdrops of sheer rock walls and talus slopes. Above the tree line, short summers allow only hardy plants like lupine, paintbrush, and heather to thrive in the alpine meadows. These bursts of color contrast sharply with the rugged, often snow-capped peaks that surround them. Mount St. Helens is famous for its catastrophic eruption, which we talked about, which reshaped the surrounding landscape with the landslides, pyroclastic flows, and the mud flows. Over time, ecological succession in the blast zone have created a unique mosaic of vegetation and wildlife habitats. Mount Adams is one of the largest volcanoes in the Cascade Range, featuring broad slopes covered by extensive glaciers and snowfields. Its summit and ridges have been shaped by repetitive, eruptive episodes and glacial scoring. I'm having a rough time. Some of the animals that you will run into, black bears, mountain lions, coyotes, elk, Rattlesnakes, now they're more common in the drier eastern portions of forest near rock outcroppings. One thing you want to be aware of in the area is rapid weather changes. So due to that maritime influence and high elevations, conditions can shift from sunny to stormy very quickly. Heavy rainfall, snow, and sudden temperature drops are possible even in late spring and early fall. It's very rugged terrain. Trails often include steep ascents, rocky or uneven ground, and stream crossings. Volcanic formations near Mount St. Helens or Mount Adams can be unstable with loose rock and scree. Then you also have avalanches and other snow hazards. In winter and early spring, higher elevation slopes can pose avalanche risks. Snowdrifts may linger on trails, obscuring path markers. So, and overall, it's just extremely remote. So you might have very limited cell service. It might be weak or non-existent, so rescue response can be delayed. So proper preparedness is crucial. Let's talk about Jim. And I'll admit, when Mike came in today, you had the name as Jimmy Carter. And I'm like, why are we doing that? Yeah. I'm like, he did pass away.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay. I
didn't know about his crazy exploration.
That's what I was like. I'm like, as some of you know, not one of the comments who commented recently that said it sounds like somebody doesn't know about the episode. That's kind of our structure. So I just usually see the name and know kind of the intro, but I don't know the story. I'm like, what are we going to get into about Jimmy Carter?
So that is actually funny because I do know that obviously Jimmy Carter recently passed away, but when I was researching this episode, I completely forgot about that, and it was a really interesting case, so oh, let's do this. And after Joe said it, I'm like, oh, wow, that's coincidental.
Yes.
I wasn't even...
You didn't come up with a Jim Carter episode in response to Jimmy Carter.
It's probably going to seem that way now that I think about it.
Okay.
But so in this case everyone has probably heard of the telephone game, where like someone will say something to another person and then that person tells another person and down the line. And by the time you get to the last person, the story has completely changed.
That's pretty much the problem with the world today.
So this happened in 1950, and a lot of the articles on it are locked away in archives that you'd have to physically go visit, or they're on like microfilm, or there's a lot of like secondhand recollection from people in the area at the time. So like there's a lot of very conflicting information about this case, and I tried to do my best to compile the most commonly talked about facts from the case.
You didn't go to the library in the microfiche machine and
look up? The private jet was in for maintenance today. So.
You can just go to your local library and do this.
No, so a lot of these articles are like you have to go to a library in like Washington State.
Oh, okay,
because
like it's not town. Like it wasn't like in the New York Times or anything.
No, these are like local papers.
Okay.
So
I used to do that when I was a kid because it was so much fun.
Yeah.
To load those in and just flip through old newspapers.
Yeah.
At least to me it was.
It's kind of cool. I mean, I'm a history nerd, so that would be kind of fun for me. So, yeah, Jim Carter was the subject's name. We don't know his exact date of birth, but it's assumed because he was 32 at the time of his disappearance. He was born in either 1917 or 1918. The date that is commonly cited, this will be a reoccurrence in this case, is date he went missing was May 23rd of 1950, though there are various sources, and usually what I found was more recent articles on the case have information wrong, and you have to go back to like the source articles from the 50s to get the correct information.
All right, so everyone listening, did you just hear what Mike said?
Yeah.
We're admitting that we don't have the exact information, but Mike looked at the oldest source material
yes,
and noted a date and noted that some of the newer articles don't reference the original source material.
Yeah, they might.
So if you read another one that's newer that says a different date, that could be wrong.
And we're not talking huge dates. It's like it's like the 23rd or the 24th. So it's you might read something and it'll say, "Oh, he went missing on the 24th." The general. So the date you might find a different date, but what happened on the mountain is pretty much the same regardless. It doesn't matter the date. So
Maybe if you research better.
Yeah, right. But and even some of the articles from back in the 50s, a couple articles that came out right when this happened were calling him Joe Carter. So they didn't even get his first name right in the article. So it's just a lot of, cases this old and not a very publicized case.
Okay.
It's information is
I wanted to make a big deal about this.
Yeah.
So as we go through it later and be like, hey, that date I saw somewhere else. It's like,
And
we
I
are
will-
aware of all the dates.
Yeah, and throughout the timeline, I will, when it's applicable, I'll mention that, this is the most commonly cited. So, like, in aggregate, this is the fact that is most commonly brought up. So,
Awesome.
his remains have never been found. He was a male, age 32. We don't know anything about his height, weight, hair color, eyes, clothing and gear he was last seen in. Because he was alpine skiing, it's assumed he was likely wearing cold weather or alpine attire. So a ski jacket, ski pants, anything that would be suited for late spring, like mountain excursions. So he was a pretty experienced alpine skier. So it's not like he went out there in like shorts and a t-shirt.
Yeah, we can assume he had the right gear. He was with a group of people.
Yeah, and
The
he
whole
was
deal.
carrying camera equipment, which some sources described as a movie camera, and others described it as like a photographic camera. So his personality, described by acquaintances, he was very friendly, outgoing, enthusiastic about outdoor adventures. He was considered very cautious yet skilled on the mountain, not prone to taking uncharacteristic risks, according to friends and colleagues. Medical issues. This is another very interesting piece of information about. So most articles, especially all the recent stuff, did not list him as having any kind of medical condition. But I found an article from the San Bernardino Sun from May 25th of 1950 that stated he was a diabetic.
Okay.
So I feel like this fact, if he truly is a diabetic, could explain potentially a theory. And we can get into
especially
it.
in that time, it wasn't as easily managed as it is today.
And later in the timeline, when we get into theories, I'll kind of go into what happens, to a diabetic if they don't get their, insulin. And it can cause a lot of issues that would be detrimental if you're up in the mountains.
Sure.
So occupation, unknown, experience in the wilderness, nothing explicitly stated, but I've read that he's an experienced alpine skier and he's done a lot. So I think it's safe to assume that he, was prepared at least to go skiing in this environment. We don't know that he probably didn't have gear to like overnight out there. So before we get into the actual timeline, so this is part of the reason why I picked this case. So why do you think this canyon's called Ape Canyon?
I feel like we did this. Okay, hold on. I feel like we covered this in one of our...
I don't think we did.
Oh, was it a group of people were in a cabin and they claimed that a group of ape men were trying to attack them and throwing stuff at them, and they shot at them, and one guy claimed to have killed one or wounded one with a gun? How close am I?
You might be.
We did an episode on this during when we'd pick states and do legends from those states.
Oh, yeah.
I think we did one.
Okay. So you might either we did cover this. Was it old from like the 20s?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm going off pure memory here.
Well, Ape Canyon is called that because of a supposed Bigfoot encounter in 1924.
Okay.
So I wanted to cover this. So I guess we might have briefly touched on this in a Urban Legends episode.
Yeah, it wasn't like a main focus of an episode.
And Joe and I didn't even remember it, so probably if you're listening, you probably don't remember us.
I
covering
kind
it
of
either.
remembered it right now.
Joe did kind of.
I feel like I feel like I proved that I kind of remembered it.
So there were 5 individuals. So this is called I guess it's just called the Ape Canyon incident of 1924. So Fred Beck, Gabe Lefevre, John Peterson, Marion Smith, and Roy Smith, who was Marion Smith's son, were involved. These 5 men were prospectors who had built a small cabin. There you go, Joe. In the mountains while searching for gold-bearing claims. They referred to the site roughly 8 miles from Spirit Lake as their base of operations. So here's the sequence of events. It's July 1924. This is when they first have an encounter with the ape men. So the men claimed they first saw strange, large, hairy creatures moving through the forest in the vicinity of their cabin. The creatures were described as upright, human-like in stature, and covered in long black hair. Their estimated weight was around 400 pounds. Their ears were said to be approximately 4 inches long, protruding upward, and they purportedly had only 4 toes. So at one point, shots were fired. So one of the miners, who's often identified as Fred Beck, fired his rifle at one of these ape men, allegedly hitting it 3 times.
Sounding more and more like I got it right on the nose,
you did
Mike.
get it right on the
although I
nose.
call them hunters, I didn't
Yeah.
remember that they're gold miners.
So according to the group's account, the wounded creature stumbled and fell off a nearby cliff. So later that same night, the men were awakened by a loud thumping noise on their cabin walls and roof. Large stones were reportedly began striking the sides of the structure. At one point, the roof was said to have been partially torn open. 2 of the rocks allegedly hit Fred Beck, knocking him unconscious for nearly 2 hours. Fearing for their lives, the men took defensive positions in the cabin, armed with rifles. At dawn, the men found that the assault had ceased. They quickly gathered their belongings and fled the cabin, abandoning the mining site entirely. They then returned back to civilization and relayed their story to the local authorities and newspapers. So in the aftermath of this, Rangers J.H. Huffman and William Welch accompanied Fred Beck to the cabin area. While Beck pointed out large stones allegedly used in the attack and the site where they claimed the wounded ape man fell off the cliff, the Rangers found no direct evidence of the creatures. The Rangers also expressed skepticism, suggesting the miners might have staged or exaggerated the incident. Though, regardless of what people thought, the story attracted widespread attention, fueling the emerging Sasquatch Bigfoot legends in the Pacific Northwest. So kind of think of this event as one of the genesis stories of Sasquatch and Bigfoot sightings in the Northwest. And recently there was a sad case of 2 gentlemen passing away on a Bigfoot excursion. I don't know if that was in this area.
Okay. This is a recreation that you can see in Washington State of the incident.
Okay. I mean, this was a big deal back then. So reporters, law enforcement, local residents were divided between considering it a genuine encounter and dismissing it as a hoax. Supporters of the miners argued the group was sincere and genuinely terrified. They pointed to the men's shaken demeanor and unusual footprints they claimed to have observed. Decades later, in a 1983 pamphlet by William Halliday, his publication said, Ape Cave and the Mount St. Helens apes. He proposed that the attack on the cabin could have been local youths, possibly YMCA campers, throwing large pumice stones from above, unaware the miners were below. The narrow canyon walls might have distorted voices and created eerie echoes, making the men believe they were besieged by large creatures. Nonetheless, the 1924 event became a cornerstone in the regional Bigfoot stories, often cited as a close-range ape man attack. And over the following decades, various authors, cryptozoologists, and Bigfoot enthusiasts have referenced Ape Canyon as the hotbed of Sasquatch sightings.
Okay, we totally covered that for sure, because I remember us.
I do remember this now. This was a long time ago.
How we commented on how they were like potentially shooting at children.
Oh yeah, I do. Yes.
Remember we were like back then just shooting at people, and if it was kids, like that would have been really bad.
Yeah. So the origin name of this canyon, Ape Canyon, although the timing of when the gorge was formally labeled Ape Canyon is debated, many believe the name was popularized in the wake of this incident. So, and the canyon's reputation for alleged ape men encounters persisted, eventually drawing the attention of hikers, tourists, and Bigfoot researchers. Unfortunately, the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens significantly altered the area's landscape, making it more challenging to pinpoint the original cabin site or investigate the exact location of the reported attack. So I just wanted to give a brief history of the canyon, why it's called Ape Canyon. Anyone who is into Bigfoot, I guess, this is an important location for...
I'm sure they know all about it.
Yeah.
Anyone's into Bigfoot.
Getting into the actual timeline of our case here, so it's late May 1950. A group of around 20 outdoor enthusiasts, variously described as friends, ski club members, or coworkers from Seattle, plan a trip to Mount St. Helens for a skiing and climbing excursion, and Jim Carter is a part of this group. It's now approximately May 22nd of 1950. The group arrives at Mount St. Helens. They set up either at a lodge near Spirit Lake or a makeshift base camp. They discuss the route and the next day's plans to ascend the mountain and ski down. Now, it's May 23rd of 1950. This is when I said this is the most commonly cited date. So in aggregate, this is what people tend to say is the day he went missing.
This is the best guess.
The best guess.
Across all research done.
But we know he went missing, and he went missing around this time. It could have been the 22nd, 24th, but the 23rd is the date that generally comes up over and over. So it's early morning. Party leaves camp to begin their ascent. Weather conditions are reported to be fair enough for skiing, but still cold. Snow is present above certain elevations. Jim Carter is observed carrying his skiing equipment and a camera. Like I said earlier, some sources described it as a movie camera, but so it's either a photographic camera, movie camera. Now, midday, early afternoon, the group reaches a vantage point near Ape Canyon, either on or close to the mountain slope. They pause at this spot to plan their descent. Carter announces to the group that he will ski ahead or on a slightly different path to position himself for taking photographs or filming the others as they come down. So Carter skis to a landmark named Dog's Head with the intention of photographing the rest of the group as they skied down to the timberline. Dog's Head was situated at about 8,000 feet, and unfortunately, this was also destroyed during the Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980, so it's no longer there. So
they have a relative point of where it is here.
So they're...
Yeah, it's like right in the blast area.
Yeah, so...
Okay.
Later on in the search, actually, a discarded film box from some sources state was found at this point where he had taken his last picture. So after getting to the Dog's Head, he allegedly speeds off down slope. Eyewitnesses recall him executing a spectacular or unusually fast ski run. Witnesses described it as wild, death-defying dash, taking jumps and risks that seemed out of character for an experienced mountaineer and skier. Another witness said, taking chances that no skier of his caliber would take unless something was terribly wrong or he was being pursued. He jumped over 2 or 3 large crevasses and evidently was going like the devil. So keep that in mind.
Okay.
So, like I said, this is a guy who was known for being very experienced, but would not take unnecessary risks. So jumping crevasses and flying down a mountain at light speed is not something he would have done.
I would say that if they witness him jump several and he's landing them, that would show that he really is an experienced skier.
Yeah.
Because I know people that can ski that probably can't do that.
Well, and there's some dispute on how many crevasses he jumped. So some sources state 1, some state multiple.
If I see someone jump 1 crevasse successfully,
Right.
They're a good skier in my book. Yeah. And I'm not a great skier.
Yeah. So Carter's last known location is near the rim of Ape Canyon. Exact vantage point is unclear. Some accounts say it was dangerously close to 150 to 200 foot drop. So it's now late afternoon, early evening. So the rest of the party regroups at the prearranged meeting spot, and obviously Carter never shows up. Initially, they're now worrying. The group retraces the path and spots Carter's ski track and they spot Carter's ski tracks, which seem to head towards and abruptly end at a steep precipice leading into Ape Canyon.
So for those watching the video, I have Dog's Head up towards the top. This is the relative point before the eruption. And then down here past the Plains of Abraham is where Ape Canyon starts. So that's a pretty decent distance cover.
Yeah.
If you're flying as fast as you can.
Yeah.
Granted, it didn't look exactly like this because this is now, but
yeah. But yeah, and he was flying, like, for some reason, just decided to just, So something happened.
Okay.
I would say. So yeah, like I said, they found his ski tracks and they followed him, which abruptly ended at a steep precipice leading into Ape Canyon. So there was no sign of Carter, his camera, or his belongings in the immediate area. So as daylight was waning, the party stopped their search to return to base camp and notify the authorities. So it's now May 24th to May 25th, 1950. That's the best date range I could find. The initial local search starts. So a small team made up of Carter's companions and local volunteers scour the immediate vicinity of Ape Canyon. They were on the rim. They were in the upper slopes. They didn't find anything. No equipment, clothing, or prints beyond the ski tracks heading into the canyon area. So now the sheriff's department's getting involved too. So some sources stated that it was the Cowlitz County Sheriff's Department. Others stated that it was the Skamania County Sheriff's Department. So again, either way, the Sheriff's Department was getting involved in the search. And this is kind of when the official search and rescue efforts commenced with limited manpower initially. So now we're getting into late May and early June of 1950. So the search now has expanded significantly. Teams of local mountaineers, experienced skiers, and additional volunteers joined the operation. Bob Lee, a Seattle mountain rescue member and highly experienced mountaineer and Himalayan expedition leader, joined the effort. So very experienced guy. And it was noted that searching was hampered by the difficult terrain. Ape Canyon's vertical drops, snow, cornices, thick timber, and loose rock made it very difficult for even guys like Bob Lee, who's a Himalayan expedition leader. And there were some sources that mentioned there was an aerial search by a small plane, though details are pretty scarce and not universally confirmed, so we're not sure if they had aerial searching capability.
Even when we talked about it in the past, remember when we learned about it, it was like a guy looking out the window.
Yeah.
And flying like as low as he could. So I'm sure it would be very difficult to see unless it was a very obvious thing.
Now, the one thing you can hope for is that Carter was wearing some bright colors, like his ski jacket hopefully was like because if it was white snow and he had, say, like a bright red ski jacket on,
yeah.
If there wasn't like an avalanche or something, you would assume that would be something that you might be able to see from a plane pretty easily. Mm-hmm. But we don't, I mean, he could have been involved in an avalanche and covered up. We'll get into all that in the theories, but so as many as 75 searchers at the peak of the search were looking for Carter, and obviously nothing was ever found. So here's some of the reported findings and theories from the searchers at the time. So searchers observe that the ski tracks appear to vanish at the canyon's edge, suggesting a possible fall. Other sources state that the possible, I'm using air quotes for people listening, plane in the search traced ski tracks towards the Eagle Creek Ranger Station, but the tracks vanish into the wilderness. However, the San Bernardino Sun article from May 25th of 1950 states Carter's tracks near Ape Canyon tonight indicated he had turned into total wilderness during the last 24 hours. Carter apparently abandoned his skis late Sunday or early Monday. Stanger and Don Roscom traced the man's tracks by plane again this afternoon towards the Eagle Creek Ranger Station before they disappeared completely into the wilderness. So this is an actual article from the 50s that states he did not go over the Ape Canyon, and he actually abandoned his skis and walked into the wilderness near a ranger station. So that's interesting. And the article does state that there was a plane involved in the search. So,
and it didn't say why they got that information, like who they interviewed that said that or anything?
Well, no, it said Stanger and Don Roscom. So I'm assuming they're part of the search team.
Okay.
It didn't list. I couldn't find out any more information on those gentlemen.
Okay.
I'm assuming they're either park rangers or they're part of the search team.
All right.
Though they were in the plane, so obviously they're part of the searchers. If the plane is, I would assume this article is pretty accurate because it's the 25th, which is just a couple days after he would have gone missing.
Okay.
So, no bodily remains, no camera, no sign of personal items appear below in the canyon, at least none that could be identified as Carter's. There are unverified anecdotes of searchers feeling a presence or believing they were being watched during the efforts, likely an outgrowth from the canyon's Bigfoot lore. It's probably one of those things like
they're talking about it while they're looking.
Like
and then...
you know the history of this place. So when you're out there, your brain just kind of like your mind goes to that place.
Sure.
Without any evidence. Like we talked about it with those divers that were in that shipwreck in Canada. Remember the Sir the British guy who took the expedition.
Yeah.
The modern day scuba divers
I am like blanking on
I can't think of it. It wasn't that long ago.
I know. They just discovered it last year, basically.
A couple of years ago, yeah. And like modern day divers reported hearing things while they were underwater in the submerged ship. And we were talking about how, well, they know kind of what happened. So like your mind starts to play tricks on you.
Yeah. There's
probably not ghosts down there, but your mind is going to go into those places.
Sure.
Same thing's probably happening here.
Yeah.
So, despite extensive searches, people were rappelling into the canyon, combing through dense undergrowth, scanning crevasses. No evidence or remains were ever found. Bob Lee, this is the guy who was part of the search. He was an Himalayan expedition leader, so very experienced in the mountains. He also recounted in a book that he published in the 60s, I believe, of having a persistent feeling of being watched whenever he was separated from the main search party. He describes the operation as the most eerie experience I have ever had. He kept his ice axe ready at all times. So I tend to believe guys like that. Like he seems like probably a hardened mountain guy.
Like if he's there all the time, it's nothing new. But then...
And he's been in some of the most mountainous regions in the country or in the world, like the Himalayas.
Yeah, so something about this felt different from what he's used to.
Yeah. So, and obviously because of these accounts and the history of the canyon, rumors began swirling about bizarre circumstances or a Sasquatch link due to the region's reputation. So people are running wild with this one just because of the history of the area. So it's now the summer of 1950. This is when the search is officially scaled back and suspended. So with no new leads, the sheriff's office and volunteer teams gradually reduce the active search. Carter is declared a missing person. The case remains unsolved. Newspaper reports at the time, which, like I said earlier, are difficult to locate, apparently describe the disappearance as baffling with no conclusive explanation. Locals, so regional climbers and hikers, remain cautious about the area. Ape Canyon's eerie reputation has intensified over the decades. And the story just keeps spreading among outdoor enthusiasts, fueling the Bigfoot speculations. And getting into a little more of the lore around this area. So by the 1960s and 70s, the Bigfoot-themed writings further entwine Jim Carter's disappearance with the alleged Ape Men incident of 1924. Some authors claim he was taken by Bigfoot, but no direct evidence obviously supports this. The complete lack of physical remains or belongings is often noted as highly unusual for a backcountry disappearance, which I don't know that that's completely unusual. A lot of the cases we cover, there's nothing ever found.
Unless we're just putting them all in one place.
Yeah, we're just covering the craziest ones. As far as conventional theories, foul play and accidental fall remain the most conventional. In modern times, various books, websites, and Bigfoot researchers repeat the narrative as an enduring enigma. Skeptics point out that missing person cases in steep wilderness areas, especially near glaciers or deep crevasses, can easily leave no trace, which Joe and I can verify that after all the cases we've covered.
Yes. And here's an image representing what you could have expected as in the cabin as the as Bigfoot throwing rocks.
Wow.
I love these drawings.
Yeah, that's great.
They're so intense.
So, and just finally here to wrap up the timeline, I just wanted to just touch one last time, just so people are 100% aware that there obviously were discrepancies in the dates. May 23rd, 1950 is the most repeated date, but some accounts mention early June. There's been no official resolution. Carter's remains or personal belongings never surfaced, and the sheriff's official files, if they still even exist, are not widely accessible to the public. There were a lot of witness accounts, but the only firsthand witness to Carter's final moments are those in his ski group, who generally recalled him skiing off at a high speed to position himself for filming. And obviously, this has been intertwined into Sasquatch lore. Carter's disappearance has been tied to Bigfoot basically due to that 1924 incident. So if you get deep down the Bigfoot rabbit hole, you're going to come across Jim Carter.
As one of the victims of Bigfoot in this area?
Yeah. So as far as theories go, I'll kind of go through the most likely, and then Joe, you can give me what you think. Okay. So I think most people...
I like how you categorize mine outside of the most likely. I'll go through the most likely, and then you just make something up.
Yeah. So accidental fall or misadventure is probably the most likely. So this area is very rugged. Ape Canyons has steep drop-offs, crevasses, unstable volcanic geology. It could have easily led to an incident, especially if he's traveling at a high rate of speed on skis. And if he's not familiar with this area, he wouldn't know the terrain. And if it's snow-covered, like, you don't know if you're 5 feet above jagged rocks or they could be just like right under the snow, and you're not going to know it until you hit it. So I think because the area has extensive rock fields, snow bridges, canyon walls, recovering of, remains in a body would be extremely difficult, especially in the 50s. Obviously, a lot of people believe, I'm not saying this is like most likely, but Sasquatch, Bigfoot, for a lot of people is what caused his disappearance. And like I said, it's all tied to the 1924 incident. So that area is just a hotbed for people who research Bigfoot. Foul play, intentional disappearance. This is a lesser cited possibility, but it's basically the same song and dance we've covered in other cases where he wanted to use the remote terrain to start over. I don't think that's likely. We don't know a ton about this guy, but
I feel like at that time period, it'd be a lot easier to do in a lot easier ways.
Yeah. Another very possible theory is hypothermia or a medical emergency. So obviously an unexpected health event like a heart attack, stroke might have led to a loss of control on his skis.
Or that other word.
Yeah, we'll skip that one. You can say it.
Disorientation.
Yeah, there we go. Obviously, the weather could have been we don't know what he was in. We're assuming he was prepared with like proper alpine skiing gear, but we don't actually know. So he could have been in gear that wasn't appropriate for the environment and had hypothermia. Now, the one theory that I actually really kind of think might be a very possible theory is related to him being a diabetic. Mm-hmm. Now, this was brought up in the San Bernardino article from the May 25th of 1950. I couldn't find it really listed anywhere else, but it was in that article. So he could have experienced hypoglycemia due to being a diabetic. This hypoglycemia could have set in. And for those who don't know what that is, it occurs when your blood sugar or glucose level drops below what the body needs to function properly. Glucose is the body's main energy source, and when it becomes too low, symptoms such as shakiness, sweating, confusion, irritability, and in severe cases, loss of consciousness can occur. So, I don't know. I mean, we don't know for sure if he was a diabetic and something happened to him where it delayed his time to get off the mountain. these kind of symptoms could be deadly up in the mountains.
It says the most dangerous episodes of hypoglycemia can occur with little or no warning.
Yeah.
So maybe it just all of a sudden, and maybe he recognized it, but it just came on, like the onset was just really fast.
And I didn't research this further. I don't know if exertion
could that be why he
that
was
up?
Well, maybe was he trying to ski back down to,
maybe he felt it setting in and he was like, I need to get down before I'm really sick. Now that is actually, if he truly is diabetic, that would make sense why he was being so reckless to get off the mountain.
Yeah, if he knows if this hits me and I can't, if I'm immobilized, will they be able to, like, I'm going to try and attempt it?
Because, like, end of the day, it will lead to him losing consciousness.
Yes.
It's not like it might happen. Like, it's just how quickly will it happen?
Yeah.
So, like, if he knows that's happening, I could see that as being a reason why he shot down the mountain as fast as he did.
Yeah.
So, finally...
How old was he, Ian?
32.
32. Okay, so he's not like a young guy, like, trying to show off, potentially. I mean, that could be the case, too, but...
But he was, he was there to film the other skiers.
Yeah.
And he was obviously known as not a risk taker in experience, so, like, it seemed like he knew what he was doing. Finally, the other theory, animal attack, we always cover it, other than Sasquatch. There are black bears and cougars, but attacks by those animals on adults is very rare, so unlikely to happen. What is likely to happen is if something happened where he passed away up there, his remains would get scavenged, and they might scatter the remains throughout the canyon, which would make it really hard for people to find anything. And now it's, what is it, 70 some years later, probably won't ever find his remains at this point.
Yeah.
So my theory is that article from San Bernardino is correct. He was a diabetic. Something happened where he started feeling the symptoms of hypoglycemia coming on, and he's like, I got to get down off the mountain, like, right now. And maybe that explains why they saw him get off his skis and walk towards that ranger station. Maybe he was thinking, like, all right, I can't make it off the mountain. I'm going to get to the ranger station. Maybe I can make contact with somebody that can get medicine up here for me.
Interesting.
I don't know. What do you think?
I'm kind of going down that same route. When you were explaining that, and it just, like, pinged when you talked about hyperglycemia, it's like, okay, he's not a risk taker, but he starts taking a bunch of risks. And if they say it looks like he's being chased by something, that means he's in a panic.
Yeah.
So if he's feeling that onset and knows what can happen, maybe it's happened to him before.
Yeah.
He's just racing to get off. And I would say when that's occurring, you're going to make mistakes. And then maybe I'm just saying, like, a crevasse or a tree well. You know how, like, the snow can be built up around a tree and you fall into it and you get stuck, especially if you're in skis.
Yeah.
And then you're going to be buried by snow. No one's going to see you.
And maybe because he's skied before up in the mountains, he knows the risk this could cause.
Or you can get confused and have, like, similar to how when you have hypothermia onset, you can start making bad decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a rapid onset and he's not thinking clearly, he's at altitude, he might be having a hypoglycemic episode, and he's just in his head, I need to get back to base.
Which is that's what you need to do.
Yeah.
He needs to get off the mountain as quickly as possible if he feels it coming on.
Yeah.
Because, like we said, it's not something that's like, well, it'll come on and then go away. Like, I feel like once it starts, it only gets worse and worse.
I wish I could ask the question of, because he said he was going to leave the group to go to a different spot. So that part makes sense. So, like, I wonder, like, did he start skiing normally and then all of a sudden start taking off?
Yeah.
Or...
Well, it said he made it to the spot where he was going to film him from, the dog's head.
Yeah.
And then his group witnessed him just speed off at a high rate of speed from that point.
So there's a reason why he left and, like, changed course of action. And that, to me, is just what makes the absolute most sense.
Yeah. That or Bigfoot was chasing him.
Yeah. I mean, off the deep end, he saw Bigfoot and freaked out and was just getting out of there.
Yeah.
That's off the deep end. But I'm 100% in the hypoglycemic episode boat.
And the only reason why I even brought that up was there was one article from a couple days after his disappearance that stated he was a diabetic.
And why that makes sense is why would the whole concept? He brought all this gear up there.
Yeah.
He went to a specific spot to get the shot, and he's just like, nah.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna, and not only am I gonna leave, I'm gonna do a bunch of like crazy stuff.
And he left a film canister, something related to his film there
so
that they found.
He dropped everything to go leave.
Yeah.
Why?
And he left in enough hurry that it's like, I'm not going to ski over to my friends first and tell them, I just got to get off the mountain. And then we don't know because we have conflicting reports. Did he continue going over the canyon, or did he get off his skis like the people in the plane saw and hike towards the ranger station, but then went into the wilderness? So like, I'm of the thought that maybe he realized, I'm not going to get down in time before this really gets bad.
See, that makes
I know there's a ranger station here. I'm going to take my skis off, hike to it. Hopefully I can make contact with somebody. But then maybe the confusion set in too much and he wandered off and got lost.
Or again, fall in a crevasse, or like it's very rugged terrain from what we were looking at the pictures. So I'm kind of in that boat.
I think if he was a diabetic, that is the most explainable reason.
This is the most frustrating thing of the show is we're like never going to know.
Unless we somehow someday get out to Washington State and we can get to some of these local towns and look at the microfilm.
Yeah.
Read some of these articles like firsthand. So
okay. Well, we might be out there for different reasons soon.
Yeah,
we can like do a little side quest.
Yeah. So excellent. Well, interesting case.
Yeah, let us know what you think. I think this is actually a really good one.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how they all kind of end the same, but they're all different enough where it really makes you wonder what happened. But yeah, please log in. Let us know what you think. Send us some messages. Thanks again for tuning into our show. We appreciate you all for listening and sharing locations known with your friends and family. Be sure to like and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, where you can find all the videos of each episode. Also, if you'd like to support the show monetarily, visit our website or Facebook store to buy some sweet swag. And you can subscribe to Patreon, YouTube, Apple, wherever you get your shows to access not only the episodes, but special events and additional shows for paid customers only. And lastly, when enjoying the beauty of nature, whether backpacking, camping, or simply taking a walk, always remember to leave no trace. Thanks, and we will see you all next time.